We'll just leave it here. They've all seen it now. The dramatic gesture was lost. Well, welcome everybody. I'm Chris Rust, and I'm one of the co-chairs of Sheffield Free Action Groups, which is a completely powerless group that herds cats across the city. I'd like to introduce my colleagues here, and then we'll ask our folks from the police to introduce themselves. So, Paul Brook is the other co-chair, recently elected, and Heather Mitchell is a long-standing member of the STAG steering group, and she's one of the leading people from Save Cleanest Valley Trees. And Anne Anderson is a very long-standing member of the STAG steering group and the driving force behind the tree campaign in Door and Tottenham. So that's us, and perhaps you could introduce yourselves.
Yeah, of course. Good morning, my name is Mark Roberts, I'm the Chief Constable at Yorkshire Police.
Good morning, Paul McGrath, Superintendent here, based in Sheffield. I have responsibility for neighbourhoods and partnerships across Sheffield, and I'm also a public order and tactical team member.
Good morning, Amanda Dickens. I'm a police constable and I'm the police liaison coordinator for South Yorkshire Police. I've worked with STAG since 2015.
Good morning, I'm Mark Roxburgh, I'm Police Constable in South Yorkshire Police's Operational Planning Unit, based at the Operations Complex in Sheffield.
Good morning, I'm Tracy Hake and I work for Corporate Office for South Yorkshire Police.
And we have a mixture of people from the press and media and people who come along from the different STAG local groups. So it's a fairly representative group. There will be some live streaming going on because a lot of people would like to have been here, and we feel it's only fair that they should have a look in. So all we ask you is to be aware of that. If anybody in the audience, as it were, feels concerned about being seen on video, I guess the best answer is to put yourself over in the corner behind Jack there, and you'll not be caught on camera. The programme for today is there are a number of little short stories that we'd like to put on the table, and for each one there's a chance for discussion and questions. We'll start with the question of negotiations and how to resolve this through negotiation discussion. Because we are concerned that the City Council still seem very reticent about entering into negotiations, we're going to announce 5 new challenges we're making. By challenge, I don't mean we're just going to shout at them. We mean legal actions and regulatory actions that we're taking to keep the pressure on. We have some questions for our colleagues in the police, which they've seen, and no doubt they'll give robust answers. And they may wish to have some statements or announcements to make for you. So that's the kind of general format. In between, after each of the short stories you hear, we'll be very pleased to have everybody asking questions and some open discussion. And of course, at the end, there's an opportunity for more questions and discussion. We're very pleased to see both regional TV, radio and newspaper reporters here, and a number of people who are recording it for the campaign. So the first thing we want to talk about is this question of negotiations or reaching an agreement that might stop the mess we're in. And it's something we've wanted for the last 3 years, and it's something that we've been actively pushing for over a year. In the last year, the Council have had 4 serious requests to start mediation. 2 of them from a senior national politician, 1 from a firm of solicitors acting for some of the street campaigners in a serious court case, and 1 from ourselves. And we've asked again. Actually, we hope that where we are now, that the City Council may come back shortly and say, yeah, it's time to have proper talks. But so far it hasn't happened. You've seen the consequences of that. It's become more bitter, more expensive, more painful for everybody. And recently we've seen very high costs imposed, not on the City Council themselves, but on the police, which I think we all regret that. And we know that the contractors, Amy, are really worried about just the ridiculous costs that they're incurring to achieve very little. At the moment, even with the support that the police are giving to the work on the street, they're managing to fell something like 4 trees a week maximum. We know that over the next 20 years they expect 200 trees a year to need felling for kind of disease, natural wastage, damage, whatever. You can do the sums and see they're not even keeping up with that. So it's a real problem. It's painful for everybody and it needs to be sorted. There is an answer, and the City of Birmingham understood that answer. They had an identical, nearly identical contract, didn't have some of the problems, for a very big highways contract with Amy. And they could see things going wrong. They wanted to take action, so they invited citizens to form something that we're now starting to do in Sheffield, a citizens audit. But this citizens audit was at the invitation of the council to get the citizens using their eyes and ears and learning how to understand what's going on in the streets and build a picture of where the contractor is falling short. Now, you may have seen in the news that the result of that, and it took great courage, because they had to fight the contractor right the way through to the appeal court. But last month they won, fantastic news, and as a result £55 million has been returned to the city coffers to pay for other services. Now that's courage and enterprise, I think, and we hope that those qualities can be found in this city, but we're worried that so far they haven't been shown. What we want to do in negotiations is actually quite tricky. We put a scheme to the council back in November, and we recognised that a negotiation is usually a bargaining thing where you have what you want, they have what they want, you might be prepared to give some things away, but we weren't in that position because we just didn't know enough. We literally could not get to grips with the technical, financial, legal problems that were causing this mess. And there was so much secrecy. Only in the last few months we've seen this magic number of 17,500 released, which suddenly transformed the understanding of everything. And the council seems to be very reluctant to tell us more about how that works. On the table over there we have copies of today's Yorkshire Post, which has new news about very important documents which turn out, secret documents, which turn out to override the documents that we've been told are the driving force for the tree felling. So the tree strategy that we know about turns out not to have the power that it was claimed to have. And this kind of raises a very big serious issue. So one of the things Paul's going to talk about later is a list of the documents that we think exist that need to be made public. So we felt that the only answer was a process of actually what one of the council people called co-work, where we sit around the table, we allow ourselves plenty of time, we get plenty of people with expertise, and we say, okay, what's really going on? What's really going on with these trees here? What's really going on with these decisions or these strategies? Can we dig down, ask the questions and dig down? And I'm going to give you an example. We've got a guy sitting over there in a blue jacket, Hugh. He's one of our many brilliant experts. He's a very experienced civil engineer. He's been looking at a particular tree called the Vernon Oak, which is famous and much loved, but it's also typical because it has problems very like a large number of the big old trees in Sheffield, problems that we don't think are serious. So Trees for Cities, the charity, have had a look at that, come up with a report. Hugh's looked at that and gone and visited. And I think you've got something to say about what you think about Sheffield, about Amy's £10,000 cost to fix that tree.
You can imagine 10,000 if you wish to price 10,000, if you're minded to. But the actual operation is 2 men in a day with a standard amount of kit that a road crew would have, grinders and things like that. And then the asphalt is done later. It's £500, £750 worth of work on that tree.
That's right.
If you want to add big operations to it, of course you can, but that's the actual work that's required. It's 750 quid.
And we've talked to tree officers.
Just to put it in perspective, just to give you an idea, I ran through Netherlands 20 years ago laying cables for Yorkshire Cable. I encountered similar groups like this with regard to the protests about the work we were doing, and we listened to them, and we worked very well. We had no problems at all. It's a case of listening to the experts and the locals.
And it didn't cost you any more, did it, to lay those cables?
Nope. And we adopted a policy that went around the country after that.
So we have expertise available in our horticulture, we have experts all over the country who want to help us, we have engineers. We believe that the practical costs involved in keeping these trees are negligible, especially when you consider £700 against maybe £3,000 to fell a tree and replant a new one. But we believe there are things going on in the contract, in the agreements that are being made, that seem to be scuppering that. And so we think a proper negotiation ought to dig down to the bottom of that problem and many like it. And maybe the council, if they use the expertise the citizens have, will start to see opportunities. And there's one more thing I want to say before we just open up, which is that, because the police are here, we have, the police are concerned particularly with public safety, public order and the criminal law, more or less. And these things have imperatives, which bring them to do some of the things they've been doing in the last few weeks. We just want to say there's an issue about the law, which we always need to pay attention to in this country, which is that public interest often runs ahead of the law. And we've seen so many cases where people have had to go and break laws, like the Kindersgarten's trespass. They had to break laws in order to establish the point. We've got into a lot of trouble with the establishment to establish the point and transform our view. And now we have the right to roam, we have the national parks, and something we take for granted. We're not claiming to be those sorts of heroes, although some of the people that I know in this campaign are my heroes. But we think that we're doing the same thing. We're drawing attention to the need for change, and the effect is already happening. This is not theory. The government, in their manifesto of the last election, put in a promise to do new tree registration. They said to us that through their work with us, trying to see if there was a solution to this, they could see that tree legislation wasn't as strong as highway legislation, and that was a problem. And they have now announced that they are developing that legislation, and it's coming out for consultation soon. We'll have a chance to look at it. And one of the things it's going to do is strengthen the consultation requirements, because when we went to court in 2016 and saw Justice Gilbert and said, look, we think this contract should be stopped because the consultation was badly done, his answer was, it may have been badly done, but the law doesn't require them to consult, so it doesn't matter. So you can see how changes in the law are really going to transform this. Maybe you guys will be out in 3 years' time enforcing a whole lot of new laws to defend trees, we don't know. So while the police will carry on doing the work according to the balance that they have to strike, we hope you'll realise that we're not here just to make trouble, we are here to see if we can bring about social change and change in the law. Singapore have done it. They've started to build plant jungles in the city because they know it's good for people. So that's all I have to say. And I wonder if anyone's got any questions or points they would like to raise, particularly if you guys have any questions to ask.
I don't think questions. It's one of the things that we want to achieve from today is both obviously giving our point of view, explaining where we can to understand the constraints that we work with, but also to listen as well, because that's part of the conversation, isn't it? It's not just telling, it's us listening as well. And I think that's what we want that dialogue, we want a level of understanding. As you say, we are governed by the law, and the law where it currently stands, and that's the premises that we have to operate on. But what we aim to do is that working within the parameters that the law sets us, do it in a fair, consultative and engaging way, so that when we take action, people, if they don't always agree with us, can at least see that we're doing it to the best of our ability in a fair and even-handed way. And the more conversations and dialogue we have, that's got to support that approach.
Hello, Phil Yates. One of the things Chris didn't mention was that SCC are the hub of the communications. We are not allowed to communicate with AD are not allowed to communicate with tree action groups. SCC are central to communication, and at the moment that's not happening. And that's one thing that we've got to get across, is that communication is very poor, and that's leading to a lot of mistrust. So we need better communication between ourselves, Amy and SCC. And as you can see today, SCC are not here. And again, they are the hub of communication. And so that's one thing you missed out there.
Yes, the only guys just say, sorry, we can't come because the contract doesn't allow it. Actually, one of the reasons why we think that discussions are needed now is that we know that Amy are working on a plan which they hope will persuade all of us that, you know, things are better and well, we can all relax. But of course, they can't ask us about that plan. If we talk to the council, then the council can pass on their view of where we stand and help Amy come to a workable plan. So that is a particularly important reason for having a negotiation. Anybody else got any questions?
You mentioned the 5 legal and regulatory challenges.
Yep.
It's already been to the High Court, it's been to the Magistrates Court,
Yep.
which is thrown out.
Yep.
There are 3 people from your group facing High Court action for injunctions. Are you going to outline the 5 regulatory and legal actions now or later?
Yes, we are. Well, within the next, in this meeting, that's one of the items on the agenda. You're quite right. We are getting the hint that before it has expired, there are going to be serious questions raised about the Justice Mell's injunction, because so much is coming to light which perhaps should have been disclosed in court to help him make his decision. We'll see how that goes. But the things that we're bringing up are quite different from the challenges that we faced and they faced in the past.
Yeah. So it makes sense for us to move on to those, I think, in terms of looking at those legal challenges. What I would say is that obviously, as you know, we've made an invitation for Sheffield City Council to be here and for Amy to be here and for South Yorkshire Police, and we're very grateful for your attendance today. I think that's extremely helpful. Sheffield City Council did put out a brief statement in response to our request for talks, and I think if you look at that statement where they talk about wanting meaningful dialogue, that's positive. They also talk about the fact that we are looking at options of a way forward. Again, that's positive. That sounds like maybe there's beginning for some change to take place. What we were disappointed about, and what we did request Sheffield City Council to do, was to give a much firmer and clearer commitment to join in the kind of negotiated process that we were requesting, and also to confirm for the residents of Sheffield that the existing programme of tree felling would remain paused until such times as we had been able to get around the table and actually have some serious talks. It's with regret that Sheffield City Council haven't taken the opportunity this week in preparation for today to release such a more firm and unequivocal statement. We hope that over the course of the next weeks we will get something that gives the residents of Sheffield more certainty that the tree crew won't turn up again on Monday, that talks will take place and that there will be real change to the current programme. So what I'd like to do is to move on to looking at the actions that we're supporting and that have come from the tree campaign. The first of those is that today a legal letter from solicitors has gone to the council informing them of the warning of a potential further judicial review. And just give you a little background to that. Back in 2017, last year, under Freedom of Information Act request, Tree Campaign has established that in the process of bidding for the PFI contract between 2009 and 2012, Amy breached contract law by failing to disclose investigations into and the subsequent prosecutions for health and safety violations that resulted from at least 2 deaths. Initially denied by Sheffield City Council, they subsequently admitted that they had become aware of one of those incidents just 5 months before the contract was signed, but did not believe it relevant to the awarding process of the contract. The breach of contract law allows Sheffield City Council, in our view, to rescind the whole PFI contract under the Misrepresentation Act, should it choose to do so. It's important to note that rescission is different from termination, and rescission means that there are no financial penalties in ending the contract from Sheffield City Council to pay to Amy. There have since the contract has been signed multiple health and safety violations in Sheffield during the PFI contract work. For example, one incident on Myrtle Road in August 2017, which was the hard felling of a tree straight into the pavement and into a garden. The health and safety executive found Amy guilty of 3 separate breaches of health and safety law. Further incidents have followed over the following months have led to ongoing further health and safety investigations. Last week, you'll have seen the gas leak and evacuation, which Amy admitted was caused by their resurfacing crew, is also currently being investigated by the HSE. This is a company that is making repeated serious errors and, in our view, putting lives at risk in the process. Yet Sheffield City Council has taken no action against Amy. On this basis, over 10,000 people signed a petition calling for Sheffield City Council to rescind the PFI contract. This was presented to Sheffield City Council in March 2018 and was rejected formally by the Council just 2 days later in what looked like a pre-prepared legal response, which contained many factual inaccuracies. Consequently, campaigners have brought in legal advice and are in the process of securing a barrister's opinion on the potential for judicial review of what we believe is an unreasonable and an irrational way the Council is treating serious health and safety incidents, and particularly their decision not to rescind the contract. As I say, that legal process started today. Anybody have any questions?
Chris Byrne from the Yorkshire Post. What chance of success do you think you have with that judicial review?
We feel that it's a positive case, and we feel that our decision to take the next step, which is to start this legal warning letter, we will obviously see what reply we get from Sheffield City Council behind its reasoning for failing to rescind the contract when we believe it has the opportunity to, and we will then consider that with barrister's opinion on whether we consider that that has a strong chance of success at judicial review. In our view, rescinding the contract at no cost to the council would be a very positive step forward for the City of Sheffield.
Chris Russ mentioned that you believe that the hearing, the injunction that was brought up last year, and the judge that ruled on it. Are you saying that when that hearing process went through, that the council or Amy deliberately misled that judge?
Not in regard to the health and safety.
No, just in regard to the other issues.
In regard to the 5-year tree strategy, yes. If I can come on to answer that in relation to the 5-year tree strategy. Was there any other questions on the potential judicial review? I'll come back to that question.
I'm the Yorkshire Police in Sheffield. Julie Dora has continually said that she sat down with Amy. She said it as early as last month, that she sat down with the Chief Executive of Amy and said, we're looking for a negotiated way out of this. And Amy has said, fine, we will take out the streets where tree campaigners don't want felling to occur. But she said that, Amy said, you will owe us compensation for the loss of revenue in that part of the contract, and you will take on the maintenance, the highway maintenance responsibilities in the tree, any tree maintenance for the next 25 years. So not only would, by coming out of the contract, would the council be hit with costs from Amy, they would take on the additional costs of the highway maintenance. And there's one big question mark in all of this, and that is the political motivation. That, there is no political desire by this council to withdraw from this contract. And however much you soften the way with these legal actions and covering all of this information, there is not the political will, and it's a question of how are you going to change the political will within the council and the Labour group, who are absolutely adamant that they will not withdraw from this contract.
Yeah. How do we change the political will? That's I knew the answer to that question. Yes, I think all we can do is to continue to try to provide Sheffield City Council with what we believe is an option to end that process without financial penalty. That's the critical element to it. Rescission of the contract is different from termination. Rescission would indicate that legally the contract never existed, and we believe that it is possible, therefore, to withdraw from the contract with no financial penalty to Sheffield City Council.
There are two aspects to any legal action. One is the prospect of achieving a result, and of course it will be down to the judge in the end to make a decision about whether Sheffield Council are even entitled to carry on with the contract. But meanwhile, along the way, a lot emerges, and it's only by taking these actions sometimes that we manage to get stuff revealed in the public domain that enables a more honest discussion to take place. So there are always two agendas with any initiative like this. And we'd be very happy if the letter that comes today led the council to think about certain issues differently and come back and propose something to us. It's always done to create pressure and to create a possibility of change.
Yeah. Any further questions about that potential? And I'll move on. Just to pick up on your point then, in terms of raising the issue about the 5-year tree strategy. Obviously, a number of you will have seen the article in the Yorkshire Post referring to recent FOI requests and responses trying to get to the bottom of the 5-year tree strategy. Sheffield City Council have refused to make public versions of the 5-year tree strategy that date prior to 2016. 5-year tree strategy was a document dated purporting to be from 2012 through to 2017. It appeared and was published in 2016. Despite a number of requests through FOI to get earlier versions of that, we are told that no earlier versions, even electronic versions, do not exist. That's very hard to understand in this digital age, that there are no earlier versions of the contract, of that statement. Now, why is the 5-year tree strategy important? Well, that strategy was relied on quite heavily within the judicial review Milner case, because it set out that there were engineering solutions and it set out the 6 Ds, the dead, disease, dying, dangerous, discriminatory and damaging. It was also relied on in the High Court case where Sheffield City Council sought and won injunctions against tree campaigners. If that document, as we suspect, was created in 2016 for publication, but is dated as though it started in 2012, then there are serious questions about whether that may present an issue of misleading the court and serious misleading of the public. On legal advice, I can't say anything further about potential legal challenges on that basis, but we consider that document and the potential for misleading the court to be a very serious matter.
Can I ask on that though? Have you got a personal opinion of whether you believe that Sheffield Council has misled both the public and 2 court cases?
My personal opinion on that, given that we can find no record of versions of the document prior to 2016, is that that document was produced in order to provide positive evidence at the High Court Judicial Review Dillner case of each tree being assessed independently, there not being a target for felling, and that each tree was considered on its own individual merits and a decision was made on that basis, and that resulted in the much used phrase, trees are only felled as a last resort. Yes, my personal view is that that was created for that purpose and did not exist in 2012.
There's also the second issue, which the Yorkshire Police brought out, that in any event that document turns out not to have the force that it was claimed to have, because there's another secret document which overrules it, which creates a very strange situation.
I mean, it's been detailed work by a number of campaigners, not least of whom Paul Selby, in terms of being then able to identify that the list of highway engineering solutions that we heard so much about, 14 highway engineering solutions, that 8 of those are actually prohibited by the terms of the contract. So to produce a document that led the public to believe that each tree was assessed, and we looked at, and the council and Amy looked at 14 highway engineering solutions, appears to be a fabrication.
The third item on this agenda is that a month ago, almost exactly just over a month ago, we wrote to the Chief Executive of Sheffield City Council as a formal complaint that they had done 2 things which I've already alluded to. They had ignored several serious proposals for a negotiated settlement using mediation, alternative dispute resolution methods, whatever. And in doing so, they had knowingly allowed a situation to arise where another public authority, the police, were having to incur very great costs and difficulty, but beyond what would be normally expected of them. We would hope that the police wouldn't be doing that, it would be appropriate. That's obviously serious in itself, but the interesting thing about this is that normally such complaints of what I should say wasting public money would have to be dealt with through a lengthy process of talking to the Council of Auditors, who might get round to looking at it next time. So this coming week we will now write to the National Audit Office as a formal complaint, which I guess we'll find out how seriously they take it, but over time we've done very well with these public bodies such as the Health and Safety Executive. After a while they begin to take it seriously and take action. So if anyone got any questions about that, yeah, please.
The last time I contacted Amy, they said that they were picking up the costs of the tree felling operation. And at that time, about 2 weeks ago, they hadn't gone to, although the option was still open, they hadn't gone to the council to try and claim any of that back. Could the police tell me, I mean, is it Amy that is still paying the bills for these police operations? And how often are they billed? How is that actually taking place? Do we know?
We're not funded by anyone for our involvement.
No, but I understand the cost of the policing
is paid by the police.
But so there's no claims back. There's nothing gone to Amy. As Amy was saying that they would be responsible. Well, that's what they were saying.
Well, but I can't comment on what they've said. I'm not aware of that. We are not funded by
I understand that
for this. We are involved with the activity. It's core police responsibility to be engaged, and we are certainly not paid by anyone for our involvement.
Amy do have an equally substantial bill because they are employing large numbers of security guards, I think about 20 plus security guards, and additional staff to look after the construction of barrier security and those sorts of things. So there is a hefty extra cost to Amy, which may be what they were referring to. Everyone's feeling the pain. Sometimes it feels that everyone's feeling the pain except possibly the council, who at least are not spending any money on this. So that's our proposition, that we think there's a serious maladministration going on here. We think that it could prove very uncomfortable for the council to be exposed to this. I guess you guys would rather not say anything about this at this point. You may have your own view as well. So.
Well, and we welcome the invitations to the meeting, but we do need to be very clear. We are here to speak about the police involvement. We want to be accountable. We want to demonstrate that we're accountable. We are not commenting on other public authorities. They're not wrong. It would be entirely appropriate to do so, particularly at the time we are in an electoral period. We do tread with some caution.
And I guess we're in a position to act freely on our own account, and it seems to be something that's worth us as citizens making a fuss about.
We'll just deal quickly then with the sort of last two issues that we wanted to raise by way of a press statement. The fourth thing is that we're calling publicly now for some specific documents to be released that we consider are essential for us to be able to move forward and try and find resolutions to this dispute. Obviously, following release of Schedule 2 of the contract, this was the release that stated that there was a figure of 17,500 target and a minimum felling rate of not less than 200 trees per year. Councillor Lodge wrote an open letter to MPs stating that it wasn't a target, and we've all seen arguments over whether it is or whether it isn't a target. Following that open letter, which was published to MPs, I then wrote and published a letter to Councillor Lodge calling for the release of documents that we would need to see if we were to believe his assertions that 17,500 isn't a target. These documents have not been released, and in a recent response to an FOI request, we were told that we will have to wait for an undisclosed time while Sheffield City Council completes a review of documentation prior to eventual publication. Our call is that to delay the release of the documents that are specified simply does not enable us to have the level of trust that we need as members of the public, that serious things are not being kept hidden from us. It is very difficult for me as an individual to read the 17,500 target as anything other than a target, and if there is documentation, it's withheld from me. I simply cannot just believe Councillor Lodge when he states, don't worry, it's not a target. In order for me to be able to analyse that and consider whether that's accurate, we are asking for, as I mentioned, the earlier versions and any documentary evidence that earlier versions of the 5-year tree management strategy prior to 2016, whether that exists. We're asking for the publication of the highway tree replacement policy, which is supposedly from 2012, with each of its annual revisions. This policy shouldn't be commercially sensitive. It's a local authority document, not an AMI document. It's titled a policy. Policies should be public, and it is still being withheld. We'd like each of the annual versions of the annual tree management programme from 2012. This document should, it's an annual plan, should show which trees, where and why those trees were planted. 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. All of those should show an individual plan. If the 17,500, if the 6,000 was a target, it should be shown in those documents. What were the original intentions back in 12, 13, 14 and 15? Those documents are still being withheld from us. We would also like them to publish any records of any agreement with AMI for variation of the 17,500 number, and also any records of any formal agreement between the council and AMI that would limit the number of trees to be replaced in the core investment period or over the term of the contract. Without those, it feels very difficult to be able to move forward than thinking the 17,500 was a target. It may now have been revised and changed as a result of the campaign over the last few years. What we want to do is get to the heart of what was the truth a year ago, 2 years ago, 4 years ago, when the campaign was really starting.
Sorry, any questions about that? Quite a pile of complicated signed documents, some of which I hadn't heard of until this week.
I hadn't heard until Schedule 2.
Yeah. Final thing is, this is something which I think Chris Byrne, you know about this, but it's nobody been told yet. We believe there has been maladministration in the pre-contract risk assessment. Now, some time ago, I met a trade union official, senior trade union official with a regional role, and he said, well, you know, there was a consultation and employee representatives from our union raised the question of public opposition to tree fellings. They said, we've been here before, we know what you'll get, you will get public pushback. and they were reassured and told it wouldn't be a problem. So I thought that was really interesting, but then you begin to discover new things. The target of 17,500 led us to pursue some opportunities. Nobody knew this number before. We'd never heard of 17,500 as a particular thing in the tree campaign. But one of the campaigners, Marcus Comley, decided he'd do a search on Sheffield City Council's website. And he found a cabinet minute from February 2010, which said, as an aside, because the minute was about something else, that the Streets Ahead programme now being planned will lead to will replace 17,500 trees. So it was known very early on in the contract negotiations that that target was on the table. So we assume that those union representatives actually were looking at the figure, the target, and they were saying this looked really worrying. The third piece of evidence is that we did a Freedom of Information request and discovered that the council they had acknowledged that there were these risk assessment consultations, that employee representatives took part, that the tree felling programme was on the agenda, but they have no record of any concerns being raised. In other words, we have a union official who prepared to talk to any of the press to say there was a meeting with union reps, they did say this, and yet there is no record, the council acknowledged there is no record of that in the risk assessment documents. That feels like sweeping something under the carpet, possibly because it was uncomfortable or inconvenient for certain people involved in the process. We don't know. So I'm not quite sure how we do this one. I haven't done maladministration in public life yet, but over the next few days we'll be looking into which authorities we ought to be talking to and how to pursue this further. We'll certainly be starting by making a formal complaint to the City Council, drawing this to their attention and asking them for an explanation. If anyone's got a question about that.
Okay. Yeah. So what I suggest we do is we've sat very patiently through a while. We've done that. Thank you for that, and thank you for waiting. As we mentioned at the start, we've prepared a number of questions. What we really hope is that those questions will then lead to discussion. So, Heather, you're going to help kick us off with that.
Yes, thank you very much for coming. And, you have questions in front of you, but I will read them out so that everybody in the room knows what we're talking about. We have 5 questions. The first one, campaigners have been concerned about police impartiality. On the 23rd of February, South Yorkshire Police released a statement announcing an increase in policing at tree felling protests and that South Yorkshire Police had an independent role. ACC Hartley then went on radio and stated the following: it's the protesters and the protester base around activities that we've seen injuries caused and we've seen some harm caused. He also said the offences have flowed from the protesters and their actions against the security and against any staff. And when talking about the actions of SIA, the security staff, he said, so far it's been seen to be really professional. These statements appear to prejudge any investigations and ignore allegations of assaults on protesters by Amy or their contractors. And my question is, how are the public to trust your assertion that South Yorkshire Police are acting impartially?
Okay, well, I think in fairness there you've taken some quotes from sure what was a longer interview, which Dave Hartley gave at the time, so I think probably in fairness to take anything from it, you would have to listen to the whole interview to take it in context. In terms of our position, we are impartial. We have no axe to grind at all with any party on this. I think it's fair to say at a time of competing demands, we would hope that this activity could take place without any involvement of the police whatsoever. We are governed, as you can imagine, by a whole set of regulations. There is an opportunity. People have issue with the way officers, or indeed the force, is conducting itself, to make complaints and make representations. We are thoroughly accountable for our actions, and as you'll be aware from the level of interest today, the actions of officers at the scene are subject to media scrutiny and public scrutiny as well. So I think we are extremely accountable. From my perspective, we want to engage with all parties, and unfortunately from our perspective, we are caught in the middle of competing aims. At the moment, those aims from protesters and members of the public, the council and the contractors, to some degree, one achieves their aim to the absolute detriment of the other. And we're in the middle trying to make sure that everyone discharges their obligations and protests as they see fit, and we're just trying to balance that, and it puts us in quite an invidious position. We're not going to keep everyone happy all the time, but what we aim to do is to do it in a way that is seen as legitimate, fair, balanced, and that we move through it without, frankly, our reputation being impacted upon.
And I think the questions about how are you seen to be acting impartially, one of the concerns from many campaigners, so to give an example of that, there have been a number of statements put out by South Yorkshire Police on your news feed about arrests, and on several occasions they've put out a report requesting witnesses for events that have taken place on a particular day. We haven't yet seen a call for witnesses that's been made responding to allegations from protesters of assault by contractor staff. Now, that would appear to campaigners to be a disparity in approach and a lack of impartiality. They're calling for witnesses when the worker claims that a protester has assaulted them, and failing to call for witnesses when the protester claims that they've been assaulted by a worker. And it's that seeming imbalance in approach that's raised many concerns.
So there's no policy that suggests we will treat people differently depending on which side of the fence they sit on. In terms of the publication on the force website, we are seeking to keep people informed. We are also receiving, as you can imagine, a significant number of freedom of information requests. And we've taken the view that the more information we can give, one, we are being transparent, and two, save people going through the freedom of information was administering them, and there is a cost in terms of staff, time, etc. in dealing with every one of those requests. We are trying to be transparent and disclose arrests, etc., and particular events. In terms of appeals for witnesses, that will be determined by the facts. If we think there is a chance that we can have witnesses coming forward, that will clearly be one avenue that whoever's conducting the investigation will take. There can be other factors at play, so if an offence or an incident is captured by film, for example, it may negate the need for a witness appeal. But those will be individual decisions taken by the individual officer who's investigating that particular issue. There's certainly no policy that would lead anyone to suggest that we are trying to skew our actions in a way that gives it an unfair view of either protesters or the other side.
I think perhaps we could make a request, because I think, I don't think anyone suggested there is a policy here actually, but we feel that the unintended consequence of the way things are done, it leads to a public perception which can seem to cast more criticism on ourselves. And so I wonder if we could ask you to have a mind to those unintended consequences, and maybe it would be helpful in this instance if the perception that is created was present in your mind. Because I think, you know, we're not claiming that someone set out to vilify us, but we think actually that some parties in this have sought to steer you and create that situation.
You know, first of all, we will be extremely resistant to anyone steering us. I would take personal umbrage with it. I'm not a puppet for anyone, and South Yorkshire Police isn't a puppet for anyone. I do think you make a really valid point though, and it's something that I'd be keen to take you up on, because we are conscious that perception is important. and what I think we do value, certainly, you know, Amanda's worked to have that liaison as well. If there is a perception, it's important that we know, because we can redress that perception by giving you information, and we wouldn't claim to get everything right 100% of the time. So we do welcome that sort of feedback, because it means that we can be introspective, look at what we're doing, and if there is something we're doing that's either coming across wrong or we're getting wrong, then we're perfectly amenable to adjusting our plans. Paul's the tactical commander. We've kept a tactical commander constant through this, because one of the things we're aware of from other protests, forces in other places have had feedback that depending who's in charge, policy changes day by day. So we've strove to keep people in consistent roles to try and ensure we get that consistency. But certainly, if there is something we are doing inadvertently, potentially, or we're not seeing a consequence, we welcome the feedback, because we might not always agree, but we hope you always walk away saying that they've listened and been fair.
Hugh, was that
your Twitter feed announces the arrests on the site, but then it doesn't then subsequently tell us that these people have been released without charge. That would seem to be not partial, because you're not balancing the view there. The other one, if I may say, is that large organisations make mistakes. And one of the best ways to preserve one's reputation is to apologise for the mistakes that organisation makes. Stand up and accept them. If you don't, the mistakes get brushed under the carpet. You get an atmosphere of secrecy with organisations.
Absolutely, and I think in terms of the command team within this force, where we make mistakes, we're willing to hold our hands up and accept them.
But as I say, the Twitter feed, you asked for examples, the Twitter feed doesn't agree with that.
No, you made a number of points there, and I'll try and answer them in turn. In terms of the Twitter feed again, if we don't put things on social media and the website, we receive numerous pieces of information saying how many arrests we've made. If we weren't publicising the fact that we've made arrests, some may accuse us of trying to cover up the fact that we're making arrests. So we take the view that we try and be transparent with the information, and we can have the dialogue and we can have the conversation. In terms of announcing when people are no longer under investigation, you can imagine the number of people that we arrest, we report for summons, we have released under investigation. There's a significant number of people that are involved in that, and it's not possible to do a running account of every investigation.
What I would have said is your simpler answer to this would be, I'll look at it and address it. The fact that you then come over with an empowering argument, justifying your actions, it does seem to me you're entrenched. And I would say less and listen more with these things.
Well, I'm not trying to appear entrenched. I'm trying to explain some of the things that we have to take into consideration and some of the things that we have to deal with.
But when I point out one side, you don't necessarily say, so look at it. It's the whole argument that presents why that might be so. We'll need a refreshing view of looking at these things. But anyway, moving on.
I think Deputy Costa has actually said
it's the Twitter feed.
I think Kirsty can just speak to the media.
If you look at the statements, we put out a statement per day.
Yeah.
And every day we will say what's happened to the people from the previous day. So we will say on the day these are the arrests that have happened today, or if there's been no arrest, no disorder, that's detailed in one statement. The following day we will then update to see what's happened to the people from the previous day. So it is noted, but just not necessarily straight away, because there's a process that has to go through. So it is put out there, and those statements are detailed on our website and on social media.
Does that include, for example, de-arrests?
Yes, and I've given guidance to members of the media that come to me and asked about arrests, and I've clarified it with officers and said, what's happened with this person? You told me one arrest, they said, I've seen 2 people. I'll go back and say, no, that person's de-arrested. Or it might be that person, and then we had one that went through the restorative justice. So we will tell people what's happened. If I didn't put those statements out, I'm only going to get asked about it by the media anyway.
Okay, well, we'll try and look out for those.
Just one other question.
Oh, sorry.
Before I introduce myself, can you not interrupt me like you interrupted you, please? Because I'm obviously making my point across that. That was very rude what you were doing there, talking over him and not giving him a chance. So can you respect me by not interrupting like you were just about to do? Yeah?
Well, I was just about to say, if the gentleman felt that I interrupted,
I felt like you interrupted.
You just asked me not to interrupt you, you just interrupted me.
I'm making a point here, you're not making a point.
Well, if I
It's
finish.
very rude that you get customers there.
What?
Right, I'd like to make my point. Before I introduce myself, so can you look at me when I'm talking to you?
I'm sorry, you seem to be very confrontational.
Okay, I'll tell you why I'm confrontational now. Do I seem physical to you or anything? Do I feel like, am I aggressive to you in any shape or form, sir? I'm asking you a direct question now, so can you answer it? It's not an ambiguous question, sir. I'm going to come to my point.
Would you like to ask?
Can I ask you a direct question now? As I don't know your role in South Yorkshire Police. What's your role, sorry?
Well, I did announce myself at the start of the deputy chief.
I don't remember that. Sorry, what was it?
Well, for the third time, I'm the deputy chief constable.
Nice to meet you. I'm Hamza Raja. Are you aware of who I am?
No.
Okay. Well, I'm the gentleman. I was walking to the mosque and stopped a fight. It was gang related. I myself am a parent. And I intervened. Do you remember the incident? Oh, you're not aware of this?
I'm sorry, don't forget. A large number of incidents.
This was on the 9th of this month. Was it the 8th or the 9th of this month? You're not aware of the incident?
No.
Okay, happened on the road in Edbridge. Still not aware of it?
No, I'm sorry, I don't know the incident.
Hamza,
I'm going to get to my point.
Can I interrupt you? Apologies for doing that, but I'm going to interrupt you. Hamza, this is a press conference in regard to
It's all related to this stuff.
It's a press conference in regard to the tree issue. If you have a question related to the policing of the
I would
tree,
like to elaborate on this transparency point.
I just like that. If you have a question related to the policing of the Sheffield tree felling programme, then please ask the question.
Yeah, absolutely. I was born in Edbridge Hospital. I still live in Edbridge. Edbridge, sorry. I'm 31 years old. I've got 2 kids, and I don't agree to the fact that the council wants to knock down these trees. Am I right in thinking that Sheffield is the greenest city, or one of the greenest cities in Sheffield? I want to stay living in the greenest city in Sheffield. I want to ask you a direct question now. I think you already mentioned the fact. Are you taking any payments from any third parties, being the council, or AMI or anything? South Yorkshire Police, are you taking any direct payments in covering up this whole story? Because this is a massive cover-up, sir.
Absolutely not. We are not taking payments, and we are not engaged in any cover-up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And then if you may go back to the chat next to you, if you felt that I interrupted you, I'm sorry about that. That wasn't my intention. But you were talking at the same time. I was trying to answer a number of points that you made.
Shall we move on to our second question?
Yes.
When South Yorkshire Police provided a briefing to some STAG members in February, it was stated that a tactic used by protesters is to make complaints to the police at the scene to divert police resources. In recent events, officers have told protesters to contact 101 to report incidents, and that they won't take reports on the site. This appears to be an operational procedure. In contrast, we see a lady arrested on the spot for tooting a trumpet and removed from the protest. Arrests have been made on the verbal testimony of Amy or security staff that have resulted in de-arrest and no charges. And my question is, have you or will you review the decision not to respond equally to allegations from workers and residents?
Okay. I mean, I'll defer to Paul at the moment for any additional things he wishes to add, but we have not got a policy to deal with different members of the public or contractors in different ways. The circumstances of an arrest are an individual decision for a police officer. We do not typically order people to make arrests because it's an individual power exercised by a constable. In terms of the management of events at the scene, There are occasions when protesters will use various tactics, and it has been noticed around the country that one of those tactics can be to make numerous complaints to officers to distract them from what we're doing. The difficulty that then gives us is we have to have a policy to deal with things, because if we don't, then we have to keep putting more and more officers to deal with every individual complaint, which I then think defeats the point that we're all hopefully keen to achieve, keeping the minimum policing level, because typically most people would want us out in Sheffield doing something else, keeping the public safe. But we have to deal with things as they arise, which can mean more and more resources being put in. So we will have policies to try and make sure that we give an appropriate and proportionate response to each individual. But there's no intention from us to deal with different elements to this event in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, if I could come in, because I think the message probably got slightly confused there in terms of our stance really is to have investigators at the scene that will investigate any complaints from the protesters or any criminal investigation at the scene. However, if it's a complaint from a protest against police action, that's different, and I think that's probably where you're referring to.
No.
Whereas if it's a ground, I'm just because I wanted to give an example to try and sort of just illustrate it. If it's a complaint where we're saying actually, you know, I've been assaulted by a member of SIA staff, then actually, or we've seen something else, then actually we'll try and take that at the scene. And there's been some examples where the actions of various other people involved in this, without sort of stepping over into a criminal investigation, where we've taken that information at the scene and run with an investigation. So the bit for me is just two parts. If it's an operational complaint against the police, then the bit about the 101, I'll go to the nearest police station, right, because that's the process we've put in place. If it's around, actually I believe that I have been assaulted, etc., then we've had staff available to be able to take that. The difficulty is if they are already busy dealing with something, it then requires other resources to come. So there may be odd occasion where that may have not happened, but my plan was really clear on that. So, you know, like always, if we've not got it right, or the example, we can build on that going forward. But it's about transparency, and the point you're making for me is about being transparent to say, yes, any allegation from any parties we will investigate, and to touch on the first point, every allegation that's been reported to South Yorkshire Police is under investigation, and we have a dedicated investigation doing those, whether it's protesters or whether it's the allegation come from a protester or somebody that's committed an offence.
And I'm very pleased to hear you say that there is no particular policy. What I am very worried about is this particular issue. There was the person who was kicked in the head by one of the security staff, and she wanted to report it at the time and was told to report it to 101. She was taken to hospital. She was kicked in the head. For various reasons, she couldn't do anything else. Her father died. She heard her father died while she was in hospital. So there are reasons why she didn't report immediately. But that is something that I'd like you to have a look at, because that was an instance where it was a report about a security staff kicking a person in the head, and that person was told, as they were going into the ambulance, to report it to a police station by 101.
And when was that? Have you got the details of that exact
Yes,
incident?
we do. I can give you the details. That. Bill, did you want to follow up on that?
I was just going to say, you investigative staff, you're dealing with two sort of, you've got professional SIA and the public. A lot of the public end up being, if they make a complaint, they get pushed down the restorative justice route, and it's swept under the carpet quite quickly. But the SIA know the procedures to follow to actually maximise the impact. And I think this is what's happening is we've got members of the press here who are campaigning this. They had a serious assault, and they got restorative justice on the day. They just got a little scruffy handwritten note for damage to their equipment. It's that you are sort of trying to sweep some of the stuff under the carpet easy, and I think members of the public are quite out of their depth with this, and they get convinced to take restorative justice for stuff that should be taken further. And I think that's one of the biggest things I've noticed is that restorative justice is used, you know, if a campaigner or a member of a resident actually complains about something and has a grievance, But the council and the SAI just push it to the max, they just take it as far as they can, and people go along with that.
Again, a number of points there, but we're not, there's no policy to sweep anything into the county. We are using restorative justice when we consider it to be appropriate, because we are conscious that there are people on the protesters' side, but also potentially on Amy's side, who have no criminal convictions, have never come to the attention of the police before, and we are trying to take a balanced approach that we don't want to criminalise people who may have overstepped the mark in pursuit of their beliefs. So that's why I've been very keen to use restorative justice as a proportionate and balanced way, not to inappropriately criminalise people who otherwise would never come to the attention of the police. So that's why we're using it. We're not seeking to sweep anything in the carpet. If people are not happy with the way it's been dealt with, then of course they should complain through the proper channels. We will review it, and if we've got it wrong, then we'll deal with that. But there is no reason for us, and no desire for us to treat different people in different ways. If there are charges, it is subject to individual scrutiny and independent scrutiny by the Crown Prosecution Service. So again, if there are particular examples where you feel that we're handling things wrong, then tell us, give us the details, we'll look at it, and we'll either come back to you an explanation why we think we've got it right, or if we've got it wrong, then there's procedures to deal with it, and we'll deal with it.
Just to comment about that, we've been through various phases. We've always had particular police liaison officers who work directly with us. Recently, it's moved quite fast, and certainly I've always had Amanda's phone number and we've talked, and the same with others, but at the moment I wouldn't know which liaison officer to text message or phone up just to say there's a problem here. So maybe we could ask you to do that as an action to make sure that whoever's currently in charge, it's Freddie, who's wonderful, but we haven't, I don't think I've got his phone number. So that would be really helpful to have that channel for doing what you're talking about. And that applies to both this, which I think is again a matter of what people are angry and upset about, rather than the fine detail of the facts, and also the question about whether the message being put out, whether we might be able to help you think about how to do that in a more what would be perceived as a more even-handed way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that perception back again, because I think it's going to run, it's a thread that's going to run through everything. Because in my local area, the first occasion when some of your liaison officers arrived, they were greeted in an extremely open, friendly manner to say, thank goodness you're here, we're really pleased to see you. Because we've had several incidents in the locality which had really shaken residents. And I'm saying residents here, meaning residents, not campaigners, people who had observed things happening but are not directly and have not been directly involved in our campaign in the locality. And yet their perception now is hardened towards the fact that, yes, actually, as campaigners, you should be expecting to be treated and have the support, and we were glad to have you there because we felt those sort of incidents would be negated, and yet, you know, the perception now is not that, and that's really, really sad. It's really sad that, you know, these ordinary residents of the area are feeling that way.
Just to pick up on something that you were saying, Paul, about the immediacy of the response, and if it's a complaint against the police, you might go to Safety Filter 101, but if it's actually a complaint of something that's happening, just to give an example, obviously you've seen video of women standing on a wall by the park, having their fingers bent by security staff to prise them off the railings, calling for your officer to intervene because they feel they're being assaulted. There is a member of the public saying to an officer, I think I'm being assaulted, and the officer stays 5 yards away and doesn't intervene. I think one of the questions is around, you know, this use of force for something that is a summary offence, obstructing highway maintenance work, section 303, would normally be a magistrate's fine. do you feel that the level of force that's being used, that we're watching, is reasonable, proportionate and necessary, given the offence, the alleged offence that's occurring?
Could I just mention, because I think you mentioned a really critical point of the incident you mentioned with the railings, which I'm presuming is the 22nd of January.
Yes, I think a few days before that.
So that for me was a pivotal point in the way we needed to sit down and review what happened, and I think that actually the points you make and the points that actually from everybody else, the wider public, of the events that played out. I spent 4 hours along with some colleagues going through various bits of video footage of what happened. I can't go into great detail because there is lots of criminal investigations that flow from those scenes. But that was a pivotal point. That was a clear reference point for our change in our police operation, because we need to make sure that we have sufficient officers to be able to deal with the position and the point that you make there. So having gone through that, and you know, we talk a lot around, you know, how many police officers does it require to do X, Y, and Z. Well, actually, having reviewed where we were on that day, and I'm sure that actually lots of people will have their own opinions of what happened, but actually, you know, we needed a different policing response in place, and that's why going forward we developed a plan, a dedicated command of that, so actually we could deal with you know, our core role, which is around protection of life and property, prevention of crime and disorder, and the maintenance of the Queen's peace, all of which for various reasons, you know, on that 22nd, we needed a different and a more robust policing response to deal with that transparency and integrity of everything that came in. So for me, when we talk about what happened, my reference point will always be that point, because yes, I accept that we talk about lots of, since the introduction of the SIA staff, we have seen lots of people that have been removed by force that will make a complaint around the use of force. But what I would say about the use of force is that our legal basis is very firm. We have a solicitor that sits alongside our silver suite that provides legal advice that it happens. But we've also had detailed discussions with our counsel, who is a barrister, that will provide our own view. Now, everybody else that uses force, so if you work, for example, as a door security person on a nightclub in Sheffield, and you use force to eject people out, you use the same Section 3 Criminal Law Act, which is the same piece of legislation that we're talking about here. And every organisation, whether you're an SIA trained staff member or anybody who uses force, will have their own legal advice that explains what you can and can't do. The question is, of course, is what is reasonable. And the key reference point for what is reasonable is for us, of course, to determine. So whilst we can sit and review what's happened and we'll investigate, ultimately, it's the court to decide what is reasonable. And we see that, and I'm sure people in this room will see where sometimes people have used excessive force and have been found guilty at court of that. There are examples in and around that. So for me, you know, what I can't say, I can't sit here and say what is excessive and what is unreasonable. Each one has to be judged. What there is a clear basis in law of Section 3 of the Criminal Law Act, and regardless of how minor the offence is, what we've also got to go back to is that use of force is stemming from a High Court injunction, which is nothing to do with the police. It's a civil piece of legislation. But Section 3 Criminal Law Act allows any person to use reasonable force. So that, for me, is kind of the critical point. And I appreciate for yourselves and members of the public, and we have lots of people here, it's a question we get asked all the time. But that's why, and you know, the issue of CCTV, this is where the CCTV bit is really important, because for me as being a silver commander, I want to actually see on this operation, so I can actually judge when we talk about that transparency, what is reasonable. Because I will act to that point.
Could I ask a question? You said that any person can use reasonable force.
Yes.
So, if a person perceives that unreasonable force is being used against them, a protester, and actually reacts with reasonable force to the SIA officers, that is also reasonable force.
But I think,
in self-defence.
I just think we do need to pick our way through this very carefully. And I think it's dangerous to make sweeping statements. I'm not suggesting you are, but just bear with me while I follow through my train of thought here. I think the point Paul makes is absolutely right, clearly, that the civil acts do then give a legitimate use of force for people to go around things lawfully. A member of the public, any member of the public, is entitled to use force in self-defence of themselves. What I would hate to lead on from this conversation is any sense that we're going to have an escalating sense of security people using force, members of the public using force, and it escalates and we end up in a bad situation. I think, as Paul's articulated, one of the benefits we have with the evidence gatherers is to get that video and hopefully there's some reassurance there that, as Paul said, he and other officers sat down and watched 4 hours of video to try and work out what's going on here, what's right. And I think it again demonstrates the approach we're taking, where we're willing to be introspective and say, let's review the operation today. What do we do? What are we going to do different? Do we need to adapt it? So we are going through this. But I think the fact that we can spend hours looking at footage, we have court solicitors' advice, we have barristers' advice, we have CPS advice, and there will still be a debate about what's reasonable. That's kind of the really grey and subjective area we're in, and I think it's, you know, perhaps a plea for understanding of the officers in the middle of that, who are doing their very best to try and pick the way through things that barristers might spend days, weeks, months arguing about the absolute degree of what's acceptable, what's proportionate and what's not proportionate. So it is difficult, it's difficult law to interpret at times. Certainly when you get to anything there's a degree of subjectivity about when does something cease being reasonable and become disproportionate. And that's some of the things that we're trying to pick through. But as I say, the reassurance is we don't assume every day is gone exactly as we would. We do review it, and we are open to adjusting the policing response depending on how things we've got. And that plays into the point made before about perception. It is important to have that dialogue by the liaison officers, that if the view is we think you got that wrong, for that to be fed into us, because then we can take a view and either come back to you and say actually we think we were right because of this, or you've got a point, let's try and adapt the operation.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Jenny.
I'm just puzzled by the relationship between the use of force that you asserted and the injunction, because I thought the use of force related to criminal offences and the injunction was civil. So can you walk me through that a bit more slowly?
Use of force is specific guidance from the law about what's reasonable. In the same way a homeowner in certain circumstances can protect themselves and property. That is a general principle that goes across the board. In this circumstances, if someone is acting lawfully in doing something under the power of injunction, that would then play into whether or not they've got a right to apply some force to do what they're doing lawfully. That sounded terribly confusing.
Well, I thought the violation of the injunction was civil, not criminal.
No, it is. But if people can sometimes use force in pursuit of a lawful purpose, so if they're doing something lawful under an injunction, they would have a recourse to use a degree of proportionate force in order to do that lawful act. So,
yeah, shall I?
Yeah, I'll explain that.
I'll explain a bit better. I've had a lot of sleepless nights at this point, so let me explain it. Let me go back to the High Court case. You need to go through the summary of Mr. Justice Mails's injunction. There's a real big deliberation there around balancing the Human Rights Act, the right to protest and all those things, and ultimately what the court needed to satisfy is, was a criminal offence being committed in terms of obstructing lawful highway maintenance work. That's where the section 303 offence comes in. Now, to lots of people, probably in this room, and lots of people that actually work in law, you probably think, I've never heard of that offence. But that is the offence, and that is a criminal offence. Yes, it might not necessarily have a severe penalty, but Mr Justice Mells had to find, within that court summary, a criminal offence, and that's what it is. So when we talk about injunctions, the High Court injunction bit is nothing to do with South Yorkshire Police, it's a civil process. Okay. However, the use of force that anybody can use comes from the offence of section 303.
So it was referred to in the injunction, but it doesn't stem from the injunction.
And we've tried to explain this on our website in terms of questions, because we know that the time we spent with yourselves before our operation, we tried to explain this, that it's the 303 offence that's critical. You know, it may be that there are other criminal offences being committed, but as soon as the court found that a criminal offence had been committed, it stopped at that point, which then goes on to the injunction. So I'm hoping I've explained that a little bit, which is why
no, I understand that. I got confused earlier when you said that the use of force stemmed from the injunction, okay. So I'm okay now. I'm okay now.
Sorry, it does strike me that there are some quite intricate pieces here, and I think we'd be more than happy if you wanted to submit a list of questions and answers over these sort of things, then we could.
We do already have something on our website which might answer some questions. I don't know how widely that's.
Well, okay. If there's specific points like that,
questions. What wants to move on is to move on from that. I think.
Actually, sorry, Hamza and Phil, and then Andrew, I think it was, if you don't mind.
Sorry, can I just ask a couple of routine questions, Mark? I think you or Paul said that every allegation is under investigation by SYP on both sides, and that lots of criminal investigations are flowing from the 22nd of January. Do you actually have the numbers, Paul, on the number of allegations on both sides and the number of criminal investigations underway on both sides? Have you got any numbers for us?
We do, and we put that out previously, haven't we, Kirsty?
No, it was arrest.
Was that arrest?
Yeah.
Okay.
Could you supply us with that?
We will.
And the other question I've got for you is, bearing in mind that the STAG are going for maladministration in terms of the council's actions, which has caused extra expense to South Yorkshire Police. Mark, have you any idea of the cost of the operation since you put all these extra resources into it? Have you any idea how much it's cost the public first? Because I think the public are interested that you have had to devote so much and so many extra resources to this, and that might flow from the maladministration of the STAG.
Well, in terms of that, we can only go to court orders as they currently stand.
Sure.
So that's our basis where we start from. In terms of the cost of service, is there any?
Yeah.
You go.
So again, to put this into context, what we tried to do on this is actually use officers in duty time.
Yeah.
And we previously tried to explain this where, you know, across South Yorkshire Police, and this is the same for most operations, we will draw officers into an operation. So it's been around duty time officers. The actual cost of the operation in terms of physical costs is £47,000, which is a report we submitted recently to the Accountability Board out in the office of the PCC. So that's where it stands.
How current is that report to when?
That's current up to when the operation sort of concluded.
Just to clarify Andy's point, so that's in terms of additional costs over time, and ancillary costs. So what that doesn't take into consideration, of course, is that if we're using officers on duty time, they're abstracted and not available for other matters. So that figure wouldn't include, for example, the cost of Paul working on this every day. That is purely additional cost that we had to resource.
Sure. So is that from the 22nd of January or to now? Is that from to last Friday or when is that to?
That's from the 23rd of February once. Well, it's actually 26th of February once we started the current phase of the operation, right way to once it finished on the, what was the last day? Yeah, the end of March, whenever that was.
Yes.
Yeah, 23rd of March.
Sure.
They'll blur into one.
We have some more questions, Martin. Perhaps Hamza, you got one.
Am I right in thinking that was the lowest estimate, 47,000 in 1 month? Have you got a breakdown of what that 47,000 is?
Well, that's the cost.
That's the cost, that's the
Since
breakdown
those
of
days.
the cost. And that's the lowest estimate, is that?
That's the cost, as Paul just said, from the day
It's
to
probably
day.
going to take into account just kind of time and stuff like that, so there's more cost involved, isn't there? And that's in 1 month, but
Yeah, no, it's just the additional cost. So they're paying the officers' wages, they've got the vans, they're paying the road tax and insurance on the vans, that's all being paid for. The 47 grand is just additional. The actual,
I don't understand the
it's
point.
like, if you've got a job, you're paid a salary.
Yeah.
If you do overtime, that's an additional cost, so it's just like overtime.
Exactly.
I think we're all on the money.
Can you provide the 47, a breakdown of what the 47,000 is?
We'll try and have a conversation after and see if we
No,
can
I'm a
figure it-
taxpayer, I'm
see-
entitled to
see if we
know
can
it,
figure it-
yeah.
see if we can figure it out together. I want to move
I
on,
think
because I'm
then-
conscious of time.
Yeah.
Phil, I think you had a
I have a
question.
question before, going back to your question before, where reasonable thoughts. Section 303 is a level 1 offence, which is the same as smoking in an enclosed space. So your reasonable force means that if you see somebody smoking in a building, you can physically eject them, the same as the SIA. Because 303 is a section 1, or a level 1 offence, isn't it? So it is a trivial offence by all criminal things, but it's still criminal.
Yeah.
So I can throw people out of a building for smoking.
And bend their fingers if they
Yeah.
hold
Same level of offence.
The power to use force by section 3 of the 67 Criminal Law Act, that's the thing that gives guidance together with some other pieces of legislation about the use of force and the to be proportionate. In terms of how that's applied to particular offences, then that all would arise around the reasonableness of it, and whether the court deemed that the use of that force was reasonable.
But that's what I was alluding to. 303 is the lowest of the lowest.
What I don't want to do is spend more time on the person where I think the point that people are making is it would appear to be unreasonable to bend. This is just a perception. It would appear to be unreasonable to inflict pain and bend someone's fingers for the equivalent of offence of picking up a traffic cone on the way home from the pub, because that's the same kind of offence. So I want to move on. There was another, Chris, one there, and then
I've just got hopefully a couple of simple questions. The first is, we've just heard £47,000 for an operation that's run for about a month. The contract is due to run to 2037. There's thousands of trees still to be removed. Is the current policing strategy, sustainable in the long term?
Well, we've got to have cognizance of money, because clearly the resource piece means that money we spend on this is money we can't spend on something else. But our level of resources is always determined by what we think is safe, what we think is going to happen, and that's the way we arrive at the level of resources. So, in terms of, is it sustainable? Well, we've got to have a sustainable operation, because we've got our core responsibilities to keep people safe and deal with things that are arising. We would rather not have that charge, but it's not something that we can seek to wriggle out from under just because of financial considerations. We'll try and balance that, and to be honest, that's one of the reasons why we're so keen to engage today with liaison officers, because we see that if we can have an effective communication, one, it's better, and we want a better relationship with everyone in the area, but equally it's a more cost-effective way of doing things if we can have Amanda or Freddie have a conversation with you and resolve things. That's got to be a better way for a whole range of reasons to police the operation.
Have South Yorkshire Police made any representations to Amy and Sheffield Council as this review goes on about the approach and about the policing costs?
I think we'll have an ongoing dialogue, but it's around the need to make sure that we're all acting in the right way with the public and getting things right. I would really avoid any conversation. You can imagine one of the questions before, if we were saying this is costing us X amount, we want to recover X amount from you, that gets us into really dangerous territory, because we police, because we've got a responsibility to the public and the crowd, not because people pay us. And if there was cost recovery from any other party, you can imagine we would then be accused of doing things in a certain way because they were our paymasters, and we're not in that position.
Can I just ask one final question? You've talked a lot about perception and impartiality. Stephen Watson mentioned that senior Sheffield Council officials have been in the control room while operations have been taking place. Can you give me some insight as to why that's been necessary?
I would really like to answer your question, but I did make the point at the start. I don't really want to touch on any other.
But the South Yorkshire Police have agreed that the Sheffield Council officers sit next to them while the operation is going on.
Here,
but with respect, South Yorkshire Police are here, so why was the decision taken from South Yorkshire Police's side?
Ask the questions as many times as you want, so I'm not going to comment on anything to touch with the council. I think we'll demonstrate more than happy to engage on anything, but I'm not going to touch on the council at the minute, particularly because of the time where we are and the fact that they're not represented.
I'm not quite sure I understand that. I think I understood the question was from the police point of view, so ignore council or another organisation. From the police's point of view, why was the decision made to have a civilian organisation in the police control room? Is that?
Yeah, that's. Yeah.
So, ignore speaking on behalf of Sheffield Council. Why did you invite them into the control room? Is the question.
We need to understand what operations are taking place, don't we, so we can base our policing response on what we think is going to happen. That requires a degree of dialogue with the people who are initiating the activity.
Anybody sure that would include the protesters as well, engaging dialogue with all the interested parties, reassure the major stakeholder in this, and there would be no consultation with us under these sorts of circumstances.
We have had consultation through the liaison officers. I am more than happy to explore a mechanism by how we can build that into the process, that we do have a more structured consultation with you. That conversation.
You're possibly referring to a meeting that was at the police station just before the current started. And I was there. It did strike me that wasn't really a consultation. It was just an information process. You were telling us what you were going to do. There was no consultation about it.
Well, I think, in fairness, we were seeking to brief and give you information. That isn't the only consultation and dialogue we've had. We've had the liaison officers. It's been said that you've had direct contact with the liaison officers, so it's an ongoing process. So I think that was probably one element of the consultation. The offer is there, it's a genuine one. On the back of this, we can have a discussion about how we can build that in, and it plays into the perception piece, the dialogue piece. We are more than happy to look at how we can structure that so that you get that level of communication and feedback to and from us.
Okay.
Can I just make a very quick suggestion for that, which is that the obvious way to achieve the impartiality and transparency would be to have a representative of STAG in the
we'll go with that. Thank you very much. I guess we'll discuss that. There was a question at the back. I'll take one from Anne, and then we need to really try and...
Given the Deputy Chief Constable's admission that you're obviously cognizant of your budget, and given Mr McCurry's assessment of the pivotal point when the policing policy changed and you reviewed it, and you say it's under constant review, is there an element there, were you caught out by what went before that pivotal point, and was that because of resources and you being mindful of using those resources because money's tight? Did you get caught out early on before that?
I think that's probably a uncharitable twist on what was actually said. I think
it was just a question, it wasn't a twist.
Well, the suggestion that I think the fact that we're constantly reviewing the operation and seeking to adapt it to what we see is actually positive.
That's not criticism.
So, in terms of money, in terms of the policing resources and approach that Paul's has to deploy, we have not set him a budget. We have not set a figure that he's got to work within. Clearly, funds are not unlimited, but we would not, on an operation such as this, seek to put unfair financial parameters about what the commander can do, because safety's got to be the primary objective, not money. So that is not a blank cheque. And clearly we will have conversations about the level of spend to make sure that it's in the appropriate level. But we're not going to limited options for financial reasons to the detriment of public safety.
Given the build-up to the 22nd, but given the build-up to the 22nd, and you said you used the word pivotal point, you used the phrase pivotal point. What went before, and why were, I mean, there were other incidents before that. Why was it that? Is there not an element there that you were just maybe not taking it as seriously, or eye off the ball? I don't know, but is there an element to that?
I think for me, and I think the review point's really important, that prior to that, our response was our liaison officers and people that were involved in the protest for a long time would have seen our liaison officers at the scene. That was okay. Something changed regarding the introduction of the SIA staff, but actually, whilst we've always had a response to calls to anybody that wishes to raise anything regarding this issue, the 22nd something changed, and something changed on the 22nd, and that's why I made a reference to the 4 hours worth of video footage. It is very clear, and I actually think for the police officers that have been involved in this for some time, and actually probably for yourselves as well, that something just changed, and I don't know what it was, but obviously going forward, that was a key moment.
Okay. But what I want to be able to do is to move into to kind of closing the discussion. One further question I want to ask, just in response to what's changed. We know a lot kind of happened on this Park Road on the 22nd, and that seems to have been a pivotal point, and I think that's what Paul was saying. That's what changed after that. I think one point to note, if you look and if you read the recent health and safety executive's comment on the use of cable ties and holding barriers together with cable ties, what looked very dramatic on the videos from the 22nd of January on Mearsbrook Park Road was whole sections of harass fencing, steel fencing crashing to the ground and flying about. The reality is that they were all held together with pieces of cable tie, contrary to the manufacturer's recommendation, absolutely contrary to the health and safety directive. So one of the things we think that has prompted a response to that has been the public perception of what it looked like, which shouldn't have happened, and was in our view certainly a failure in managing the safety of members of the public, and shouldn't have required the increase in police resources. However, that's the decision that was made. What I want to move on, I suppose really, I'm going to take the optimist's view is that we're not going to need to have another meeting, that we're not going to be on Mearsbrook Park Road again, or Thornsip or Kenwood. We're not going to be in a situation where you are having to police significant protests there. I'm ever hopeful that we'll move to a point at which our council responds to what the public are saying, and we come to a way of resolving this without the need for the level of protest that we see. That's genuinely what we all hope. One of the interesting things after the Russell's Road incident, which is certainly what grew a lot of support for the campaign in general, was that it turned out that South Yorkshire Police had been told by Sheffield City Council that the trees absolutely had to be felled on Russell's Road because they were dangerous. Turned out after, none of those trees were listed as dangerous, they were all listed as damaging the pavement. And we know that certainly caused some concern from South Yorkshire Police. We understand from the statement that Sheffield City Council have just made that they're considering options to do it differently. And that may indicate that the tree we had the Battle of Mearsbrook Park Road under, they might not come back and fell it next time. They might decide that actually they can fix the pavement, which would raise the question, why have so much of your resources been used to protect council ordered work that might now no longer be necessary? And our argument was it wasn't necessary in the first place. If sadly we meet again under a tree, how are you going to have assured yourself that you're not there supporting actions that realistically no other local authority would engage in?
Well, just envisaging meeting under a tree. of the reason for the tree felling, I appreciate the view around it, but what we've got to satisfy ourselves is that what the council or their contractors are doing is lawful, not necessarily the reason for why they're doing it.
Okay.
So if the tree activity is lawful, then to some degree it becomes a moot point about why they're doing it. We would be there to support people going about the lawful business and facilitating protests. So I see what you're saying, but in terms of would we be there, if the activity is lawful, then we would be there.
And would it shift your balance in how you balance the rights to work and the rights to protest? If you had a perception that actually perhaps the protest, after all, had a validity that was afforded a greater level of right than has been allowed up until now, or since the 22nd of January.
Going quite hypothetical. I wouldn't be.
I think we're asking you to consider it.
Well,
what we don't want is your resources to continue to be used for something that 3 months down the line everybody says actually we didn't need to do that after all.
Yeah, I mean, I will come back to the fact that we will be there if people are going about lawful activity. I think there's probably a broader and longer philosophical conversation almost about it's not for us to judge the merits of various things that are actual lawful, because that puts us in quite dangerous territory, doesn't it? I think if lawful activity is lawful, and there are plenty of examples where police officers might be engaged in policing something that they may personally have real issue with. I'm not talking about trees, but you can imagine all the political demonstrations and all manner of things where officers may have a particular view, but actually they find themselves quite often defending things because it's the right to do it rather than what they're actually saying. So I think if you get into the realms of the police just doing what the police and what they agree with or what they think is right or got personal belief about, it's dangerous territory. If it's lawful, then we're all under an obligation to do our duty, aren't we?
So two final questions, and then David.
There's lawful and there's also reasonable and practical as well, which is also part of the legislation. But can I also just ask you the question, if Amy wanted to cut down every tree in Sheffield because it was cheaper for them, would you do that? Because you earlier mentioned that money should not stand in the way of safety, but actually this is what Amy are doing. They are saving money by cutting trees down and endangering people because of that.
Well, I just come back to the point, if people are engaging in lawful activity, then we have an obligation to do our duty around that. There is clearly a point that we haven't got unlimited resources. On a day-by-day basis, we are making operational decisions about what we go to and what we don't go to. There's a prioritisation process, and at the top of that is public safety. And that's how we allocate what we go to. So we're obliged to do our job if people are breaking the law.
And are you lobbying Sheffield City Council and Amy yourself? Are you actively doing that, telling them that they're imposing a burden on you?
Well, I don't think that'd be appropriate for the police to tell the public authority what it should be doing if it's lawful activity.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Just picking up on the word lawful there, what about the situation where campaigners believe that Amy are acting unlawfully and there are elements of what they're doing that are unlawful? And I'm making reference to oversale. Some trees need branches removing over people's property, and when they've not given them permission to do that, it's my understanding that they're acting unlawfully to do it. If there's some element of removing a tree that is unlawful, shouldn't the police be intervening and stopping Amy doing that? And if it requires that, and Amy have already unlawfully gone out in the middle of the night and removed branches from a tree because they couldn't do it with the police watching, shouldn't the police be saying, you've already acted unlawfully and we can't support what you're now doing?
I get the sense there might be the distinction between criminal law and civil law.
But the whole injunction is based on civil law, and you're acting on 303.
No, We've dealt, the 303 comes from criminal law, not civil law. I think the point
But
that
the-
David is making is that the oversale issue is a trespass in criminal law, so it's a trespass in the same way as entering the work zone is a trespass according to Justice Manual. So I think that query was, on the ground, if protesters are saying you should stop them doing that because they are trespassing on that private property to do their lawful work, which makes their actions unlawful in our view, will your officers on the ground be aware of that, able to respond to that being pointed out by protesters, and to prevent, on the ground, Amy from carrying out works that would constitute a trespass?
I think as these scenarios arise, I think it's expecting a lot for a constable on the ground to take quite complicated legal decisions that I'm sure if it gets to the High Court, greater brains than mine certainly will apply themselves to working out what's legal and what's not legal. As we go along, we have various examples. We want to go back and consult with our legal support, and we will then take a view so that we can give the officers on the street who are in the middle of this trying to make very quick decisions. We will try and give them the best possible guidance so that they take the best possible decision.
David, you'll be happy to sit in the control room
Well, that-
to the officers on the ground.
That was what I would like to have said is there is information available with the tree campaign that might make a difference to how you police things if we were consulted in the same way as you're consulting the council and Amy on issues like, for instance, Abbeydale Park Rise, that there were 2 trees that clearly they had oversale issues with. They failed to fell them. We could have told you about that before they even went there, but we weren't party to that. Instead, there was this raid and a reaction by the police.
The suggestion that there's information and intelligence that we can assist you with if you're listening and with operations on the ground. I think that's the suggestion.
Again, I think, I've made the offer a couple of times. On the back of this, we'd like us to have the conversation about how we can put that into a structure where we can build that into the planning and operations so that we have that information from you.
Can I just add a little bit, because I think it's really important about just a reference point around maintenance and highway maintenance. And again, going back to the court injunction, Mr Justice Mayles talks about lawful highway maintenance. And whilst accepting the oversale bits, for us, it's about, we can't get into detail what's lawful, what's unlawful. It's about, what is highway maintenance. And ultimately, we rely on people to provide us with information. So, just in terms of the oversale, etc., there's a lot of detail there, and without going into operational cases, it's about what actually has been already summarised in court, what is local highway maintenance, and I think that the summary of that court transaction is, explains that, the role of other public bodies around that issue.
Okay, I think we need to try and draw to a close. We've kept you all a long time, so Chris.
Yes, so thank you very much. It's been a warm day. Thank you. Everybody has asked such good questions. Thank you especially to our friends from the police. Been firm under fire. And I think we have got a sense that, well, okay, I hope you understand a little bit better where we're coming from in the big picture as well as to do with yourselves. And that there are maybe ways that you might be able to get more out of us in terms of help and support. And I think, well, I'll just go back to the thing we started with, that there's always what happens on the street, the criminal law and so on, but there is this bigger picture of the way society changes, the values change, and the way that the public interest changes. And of course you have to always have in mind public interest and priorities. But for us, I think we're at a point where we are actually really doing something in this country to change law, to change perception, and we hope to change this city to make it a healthier place to live, because in the end that's what it counts. That's what it comes down to. These trees are an important part of our health system. So thank you all very much for coming. Sorry we couldn't carry on with the conversation, but
Sorry, just to say, was there anything by way of closing comment that you wanted to make before we end up?
Yeah, I don't want to prolong it because
no.
I think law melts. However, one can say thank you for the invite. The way that questions are put I think underlies both the passion but also the considered nature of the arguments that you're kind of advancing, and I think that's really helpful for us because constructively it gives us something to work with going forward. We won't get everything right 100% of the time, we acknowledge that. I would hope from some of the comments we've made and some of the thoughts that a couple of the senior officers in the force have had to pose to some of the questions, some of this stuff's quite difficult. I would hope that you're reassured that we're coming at this from the right way. We want to be fair, we want to be balanced. We recognise that predominantly dealing with people here who aren't criminals. They're not trying to do anything nefarious. They are articulating a strongly held belief, but equally there's got to be an acceptance that's what would be within legal bounds. So I hope if you're reassured that we're approaching it in the right way, this could be a good jumping off point to have that increased level of dialogue, so that we do it with as least minimum of harm all round to everyone concerned.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. See you under a tree sometime. I know some of you want to ask us questions individually and talk to individuals. We'll be around for a while. That's outside the fresh air.